Hello, OBA. My name is Greg Ruffino. I am the Director of Training at Williams & Fudge Incorporated down here in Rock Hill, South Carolina. I'd like to thank you for extending the opportunity to me to be a part of your spring meeting. So hopefully I can provide you with some good insight and some content that will help you in your day-to-day. I'll be kind of focusing more on the actual collection side of the world that we operate in. The fun part of the strategizing, the negotiation, the conversation with our students and consumers. So the title of this here is Get Paid. And just for your reference, we are filming this is Monday, April the 12th. I believe you're watching this sometime in May. And I'm hoping everything is A-okay in May and the world is progressing nicely, getting us ever so closer back to normal. So the topic here, Get Paid, is going to jump off of an acronym of P.A.I.D. And I know we all love a good acronym when you're being presented to, but the idea here is to find a very simple way within the somewhat complex jobs that we do to find a structure to the conversation that's going to lead towards success. When I say complex kind of things, when we are involving human nature, human will, and human conversation, we are liable to go in any direction at any point in time. So that does kind of break it down to some kind of complexity. So I kind of want to get started here with just the thought process of what I have on the screen here is one of many things that in our office that we have used over the past years. The one on the screen here, I think, isn't necessarily so much an operation anymore, but it comes from our compliance department here. The group of our people, our staff that monitor our calls, they monitor our collector activity, they listen to live calls, they listen to recorded calls, they're listening to make sure, we're doing the right things and checking all those good boxes. So oftentimes you'd have a compliance personnel listening to calls and using the sheet that you might see on the screen here, where it is a series of checks and balances, line items, one after the next, where it's really looking back at, is the collector saying X and are they doing Y? And then they bring that to the collector's attention, and through some training, they'd be told this is how the call went and kind of like this is how we scored you. And I want to go back to when I very first started working this job, where you're kind of brought into the world of accounts receivables and collections, and they're kind of telling you like, well, as long as you're a good conversationalist and all you really need to do is speak to the student, speak to the consumer, if you can drive a dialogue and hold a conversation, you should do totally fine in this job. And for me, coming from my background being in restaurants and hospitality, food and beverage, that seemed like a natural fit. You talk to people all day and you give good customer service and you have lots of conversations. So coming into collections, you start getting trained on all different kinds of elements, and there's this 8 collection step process that you might get trained on in the very beginning, and one of these 8 steps involves this psychological pause, all these kind of things that you're supposed to try to remember. And then in addition, you get a compliance audit sheet that looks something like this, and the sheet might have another 2 or 3 pages that go to it, and when you look back on certain conversations and you're being told you didn't do this but you did that, you did this but didn't do this, and you think back to yourself and just say, I was only trying to have a conversation, and it's kind of hard now when I'm supposed to remember all of these things. In addition, we're all dealing with a lot of laws and regulations, federal laws, state laws, institutional laws, and policies. And you might recognize some of these other acronyms on the screen. I know specifically at your level you deal a lot with FERPA, and there's probably some HIPAA involved as well. And all of these acronyms, all of these laws and regulations. And here I am just trying to do my job as a collector and simply have a conversation with another individual. And on one side of my brain, I'm trying to remember all the laws and regulations and policies and not break those. And on the other side, I'm trying to memorize all these different collection steps I'm supposed to take. And all that kind of gets convoluted into a big mess in our brains sometimes. And it makes just a natural conversation difficult to achieve. And if we're having difficult in that conversation, then guess who's going to see that, and guess who's going to pick up on that and hear that? The student, of course. They're going to see you struggling, they're going to hear you, they're going to feel that you're just not able to really get through talking about this account. So what we're trying to do is take this version of our acronym of P.A.I.D, which of course we'll break down here soon, and what the end goal here is to make something that's very simple that we can look back on and say, hey, there's these 4 little components of this call, this conversation. Doesn't necessarily just have to be in relation to collections. It also falls in line with a lot of negotiations that you might do in and out of your day-to-day personal or professional life. So part of what this is really getting into is it's very easy for anyone in this job to take each conversation as it comes, to kind of roll with the punches, to roll the dice, so to speak, or to kind of just wait and hope for that lucky individual to walk into the office or pick up the phone and they just say, hey, I know I owe a balance, and how about I just pay it in full today? Well, anytime that happens, that's all well and good, and we're happy to take that payment. We can process that payment, no problem. But when that doesn't happen, what happens with the rest of that conversation or the rest of the day? So what we're really trying to make happen here is exactly that. You are trying to make it happen. It's not about sitting around getting lucky. It's not about sitting at the slot machine and pulling the lever and hoping something happens. It's about how can I go into my every single conversation with these students in a collection atmosphere, and how can I increase my odds? How can I up my probabilities of resolving the balance? What can I do to actually make it happen? And that's exactly what we're here to talk about. What can I do to increase my odds in these conversations? Is there a bit of consistency I can take? Can I make a strategic approach in every talk off? I want to make sure I'm following a basic conversation path, follow along that structure, and of course, I'm just trying to get P.A.I.D. So let's start to break down what this structure looks like, how this can kind of flow, how this fits into most of our conversations. And as I'm talking through this, I am going to be playing a few calls, a few selections of actual real calls, real collections, real consumers and students, to kind of highlight some of these areas that we're talking about, to kind of bring it into proof, to kind of bring it to your eyes and ears so you can actually hear it happening and get a good example. I do want to give you the heads up, though. Anytime I do play a call for you, it will be highly edited. Of course, we're removing both parties involved. For the most part, we're removing personal identifiable information. We're removing anything that really wouldn't want to be said. And I'm really just trying to edit down to get to the point. So if you're hearing the call and you're wondering why it jumped or skipped around or anything like that, just keep in mind the call's edited for the purpose of making the correlation. So this is all about making it happen, following a good conversation structure, being strategic about it, and doing this consistently. So let's go. Let's move along. So to get P.A.I.D, to get paid, we're going to start with what P equals. And P simply stands for paid in full. You can also slash that and say it might also just stand for payment. And really what this gets back down to is negotiations 101. Negotiations for a lot of us typically means that it's something that we are consistently working on. There are some people out there in the world that are kind of born with those natural gifts and abilities to negotiate every single thing that they come across in life. But a lot of people like me, it's something that we have to focus on quite a bit, specifically in the business aspect, and we're talking to strangers who might have no obligation to actually pay us if they don't so choose to. So really what this gets down to is at the very beginning of the conversation, once you get through the formalities and you start to get into it, it is to present to the student, to present to your consumer that it is the expectation that we are seeking to have this balance paid in full. And I can assume or hope that that's possibly an expectation at your institution. I'm sure they're looking to get their money back sooner than later. Now, when I say payment in full / payment, I don't want to take away from the fact that we aren't just looking for payment in full. But at the beginning of the call and of the start of that conversation, I do want that student to know the objective in this call, the objective in our conversation is for this balance to be paid or for us to get back into payment. So when you start with the payment in full, letting them know the balance is due in full, we are seeking to have this paid in full, I'm setting my bar nice and high. And negotiations 101 will tell us when we start our bar high, it's a lot easier to work our way down into more reasonable or expected levels of payment. If I start my bar very low, it's nearly impossible to talk the student up into a higher amount or up into a balance in full. So simple numbers here as an example, if the student owes $1,000 and the very first thing I offer them is a low bar offer and say, hey, you know what, you have $1,000 balance owed to us, but here's the deal, if you want, you can get us set up on a $50 a month payment arrangement. However, if you like, we'd much more prefer that you just pay the balance in full. Well, all the student is going to hear is something that is probably reasonable and doable for them, at $50 a month. And that's exactly where they're going to rest on. They're going to rest at $50 a month. And it's going to be a lot harder for you to build them up into $100, $500, even a balance in full. So you are going to tell them that we are expecting the balance to be paid in full. However, if that is not a good option for you, of course, we will talk about lots of other options that we have available for you, but the purpose of this is to seek payment on the account. That is bringing it down just as a simple negotiation tactic. It is letting the student know what you need. It is letting them know what you want up front so you can work your way from there. Now, in a moment here, I'll play a very quick example of what that might sound like, asking for that payment in full. And, going into all these conversations, we might expect that to go very well, to go very smooth. You ask the student to pay in full, they say yes, no problem. The rest of this conversation, the rest of this acronym of P.A.I.D. doesn't really apply then. When you ask for payment in full and they say yes, then no problem. Let me process that payment. And it's something else that we should keep in mind as well. This is very true in life in general, not just in the business world, but you and I, human beings trying to make it out there in the world, honestly, in my opinion, and I believe it to be very true, we should not expect to get something that we are not asking for. People aren't necessarily very good at reading minds. So if you want something in this world, you got to put it out into the universe, and you're more than likely going to get it back. A lot of people won't just read your mind or have an understanding of what you're really wanting. So me setting that tone right away, saying this is what we're looking for, this is what we need. If I don't ask for it, I should not expect it. So speaking of expectations, you're right, you go to the fast food joint, they got the nice pictures on the wall, and you say, I want that hamburger. And when you order it and it comes out, and more often than not, there's a difference between expectation and reality. So you can go into every call and conversation, and in the beginning, you ask for payment in full or for payment. And in your mind, you're expecting something really nice to come of that. But sometimes the reality comes out, which is how the consumer responds. So let me play this call real quick for you. I'll come back and give you some thoughts on it. Hopefully you can think through how this collector gave a good example of what happens when the reality actually came into play, not the expectation of a really nice looking sandwich, but the sandwich there on the right came out of the consumer. How do we proceed from there?
Okay. Your defaulted education balance is in the amount of $4,357.68. My client is requesting payment in full. How would you like to take care of that today?
I don't have $4,000.
Okay. How much are you offering on the account today if you can't pay the balance in full?
I'm not even working right now. I've lost my job, so...
Okay. Well, I understand. I've been in the same boat you have, and it's not fun to be in that boat, but we do need to get payment on this account. Would a payment plan be something you'd be interested in?
I can do that, yeah.
Okay. So let's do this. I'll go ahead and update your file and make sure we have all the correct information on file,
Okay.
and then we'll look into some payment plans.
Okay.
Jessica, what is your...
Okay, so hopefully you heard the same thing I'm hearing, and the collector came out very simply saying our client is expecting a payment in full. The consumer gave us a dose of reality that she's unable to do that for any number of reasons. And the important part of that call, the very, very important part of that call is you didn't hear the collector get tripped up. They didn't sit there not knowing where to go next. They weren't caught off guard. They were expecting payment in full, but in reality, they're also expecting the consumer or the student to kind of give them the I can't, I won't, and here are the reasons why. So what we did in that call, what you would always want to do is not turn a negative and keep going on a negative, but you kind of brush past that, the negative in that being I can't pay in full, I'm unemployed, all those kind of things. You don't want to tell this person that's unacceptable or that's not okay or anything derogatory or negative along those lines. You come right back and you tell them that's okay. We understand. We have lots of options for you. And then what you heard her say as well in that call is let's go ahead and update that file. That might give us a clue as to what's going to come next in this call. So again, kind of bringing back to the point of we asked for payment in full. We said it was an expectation. We told them that it was okay that they couldn't achieve it, but we also wanted to let them know there were other options. So what we've done now is you might have the consumer thinking this person only wants payment in full. They're talking money. Maybe this person's a little bit stressed now. They're backed into a corner. They're thinking all we want to do is talk money and take their money. And the reality here is we can kind of turn the page here for a moment saying, okay, I understand today that we're not going to be able to achieve the balance in full. Let me make sure I got some information on file updated. Let me acquire some information. Stop talking about money for just a moment, and we'll see where that conversation takes us. So, speaking of that, moving along with the P.A.I.D format, the A is going to stand for acquiring information. I would hope or assume to some degree at your institution there's going to be best practices and policies that state that you should always be seeking to update the students' files, confirming addresses and phone numbers and emails and things like that. So I like to explain that to the student. Look, I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. It's important we keep our files updated. I like to tell the people I speak with in a collection capacity, say, hey, look, we don't want to send any letters or emails in relation to this account to anyone that's not you. And I just want to make sure I have the right address. I want to make sure I have the right phone number and the right email. That way your private information stays private, because part of our job, as long as this balance is outstanding, our job will be to try to contact you back. And if not us, then perhaps the collection agency that we partner with. So I'm either verifying or updating. A lot of the times I'd rather the student give it to me versus me saying, hey, do you still live at 123 Main Street? Things along those lines. And I want to hear them say it, so it's a confirmation back for them. Also, if your institution requires it, or if your policies or best practices require it, certainly here on our end, on the third-party collection world, is we are asking for permissions based on laws and policies. Can I leave you a voicemail? Can I send you detailed emails? Things along those lines. If your mom calls in, can I speak to her with permission? There's your FERPA laws and all that stuff, right? So it's making sure I'm asking for certain permissions, if that's the case for you. The next thing you might want to do as a part of this financial or acquiring information, as you see on the bullet point here, is a financial profile. And it's getting a basic understanding of their employment and their money situation. And a financial profile can go in a lot of different directions. I will be playing another call here in a moment that goes through what I would qualify as a robust financial profile. I would not advocate that you need to go that far down the rabbit hole of asking financial questions in what every single bill is that the student might have. But you might want to start with asking about what some of their basic expenses are. So this is, again, when someone tells you, I can't pay it in full, or I can't pay you anything that's really substantial that's going to get this account paid off really quickly. So you might ask them, like, well, first of all, open-ended questions are very good. Instead of me saying, are you working, yes or no, I might just come out with an assumption that says, where are you working? It just adds a different element to the mentality of the conversation, that open-ended question. It makes it a little bit harder for them to give me a one-word answer back. So I might inquire about where are they working, how often they work, how much they make, right? Just to get that ball rolling, talking about money just a little bit. But I'm also going to ask them a little bit about some of their top finances. What are your biggest expenses right now? And of course, this will depend based on the age of your student, but oftentimes you get some sort of housing expense, right? Whether they're renting a house, renting something off campus. Maybe you're speaking to an older student that actually has a mortgage. Some people obviously might have the current student loans, depending on their situation. They might have childcare, car costs, car payments, things of that nature. But it's really just to get them to talk about what their major expenses are. And ideally, if they are working, you're able to match what they're making versus what they're spending. But either way, it's about getting them to talk about what some of their major expenses are, and that's going to give you some insight into their life as well. I'm acquiring information from this student, especially if they're talking about childcare or things along those lines. You get to know them a little bit more and can kind of relate to them a little bit more. So I'm also going to be asking about their needs, their wants. More often than not, if they're owing a balance to you, then what is their enrollment status? Are they able to re-enroll for the next semester? What if they're trying to get their transcripts or their diploma released? What are your needs? What do you want? And what kind of time frames are we working in? So if a student tells you, if you're watching this in May 2021 and they're telling you I'm trying to re-enroll for the 2021 fall semester, then you know that, negotiations aside, it's going to be fairly straightforward that you might be working on like a 2 to 3 month time frame to get the balance paid off, simply because of their needs or their wants to re-enroll in the fall. So let's get a call example here going that what I would deem as a robust financial profile, just to serve as a good example. I will say up front that we are going to hear what we could qualify as the perfect student. They give a lot of great answers, they earn a decent income, and it seems like they're trying to do the right thing. But the collector you're hearing is somebody that does this style of call with almost every student that's going to let him do it, and he does it consistently. And I use him as an example because he's getting paid consistently and he's doing a great job. So this collector is going to get the individual invested in the call. They're going to get them invested in the process so they feel like they're a part of it. And this kind of information we're gathering is only going to help us further down the road and further into our conversations. It's also going to help us set the bar of where our negotiations to begin with, based on the information the student has given you. So this call is a little bit longer. I think it might get into the 3-minute range here, but let's give it a good example and see what happens at the end.
Okay. Well, let me just kind of go through a kind of financial profile with you, Raymond, and we'll go from there. Where are you currently employed? Okay, and what do you do there?
I'm an account manager.
Okay. And your current bring-home pay each month?
I'm at $3,863.
I'm sorry, you said $3,862?
63, sir. That's correct.
Okay, all right. And could you please list each bill that you have? Yes, sir. Rent, mortgage, phone, car payment, car insurance, that kind of thing.
Okay. Sure. So let's see, my month is $1,293. In terms of utilities, we've got PG&E at $70, Sonic Internet at $40,
Okay.
AT&T phone at $45, transportation costs at $450,
Okay.
renter's insurance at $6, and a medical membership insurance fee for $13. Okay, so then as to the Navient Corporation,
Okay.
$103 per month.
Okay.
I can think
Let me
of.
just kind of go back through this with you. $12.93 for your rent, $70 for utilities, $40 insurance, $45 for phone, $450 for transit, $6 for renter's insurance, $13 medical, $103 for Navient, $9 for Amazon, $17 Google, $10 Apple, $150 for other, $800 for food.
That sounds about right.
Okay, so that's right at $3,000. So that leaves you about $863 at your discretion each month. You have someone living with you, is that correct?
Yes, I'm a renter with a roommate. That's correct, sir.
Okay, but that is all your portion of the bills, is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
And their income does not contribute to your day-to-day life?
No, does not.
Okay, all right. What is your kind of goal here in terms of getting this paid? Are you trying to go back to school? Do you need financial aid down the road? Are you just trying to clear this up as a whole? Or?
I would like to, my first goal is to just clear it up.
Sure.
Okay.
What do you think is an appropriate amount? Please understand they're asking for balance in full. What is an appropriate amount you can put towards this each month?
Given the information that you've just sent me, I'd like to set I'd like to set up let's say $800 a month.
Okay, so hopefully that was a good illustration of getting the student involved in the process. If you heard correctly, like I did at the very end, the collector really what they were doing was trying to paint a picture saying, okay, I understand you can't pay the $3,000 and change. What kind of money are you making? What are your bills? Looks like there's X amount left over. Here's a picture for you. You tell me what you're able to do. The collector was probably expecting somewhere in the $200 to $500 range, I would assume, and the student came back with saying, well, essentially I'll pay $800 a month. I think they ended up setting it up for a slightly under $800 a month, an agreement that said let's leave you some money left over just in case of a rainy day. But like I said, this was a perfect example of a student. But that student went ahead and paid this off in a few short months. The collector got them involved. They painted a really nice picture for them. And kind of at the end there, the student even said it himself, based on the information we just went over, how about $800 a month? So when I say that that was a very robust financial profile, I would say that you don't necessarily need to worry about or ask about how much do you pay for your renter's insurance and, you know, some of those $5, $10, $15 bills. We're looking more just for very general, easy understanding of some of their major expenses. What money's coming in and what's the big money coming out? Where does our bill fall in line with that? And obviously the consumer doesn't necessarily have to play this game with you. They don't have to answer these questions. They have every right to say no. Really, it's us asking and articulating, this is why. I want to ask you these questions because it's going to help me understand where you're at, and it's going to help me present the most reasonable kind of numbers that we can work with for you. So hopefully the student there understands and will go along with you. All right, so we've asked for payment up front. If they don't say, yep, I'm going to pay you this awesome amount every month or pay it in full, then we're going to move on to acquiring information. After we acquire some information from them, we're going to interact with the student, and there's your I. Interact with the student, or another way to chalk that up is build rapport, right? That's what we're going to try to do our best with. Now, the difference between kind of acquiring information and this interacting and building rapport, don't overthink where I'm trying to get at with this. Those things can kind of intermingle. I don't have to strictly go, well, right now I acquire information, and then once I'm done with that, I will then now try to interact with you. The reality is those two things should be melding together. As you're asking these questions, you're getting this information from them. You know, of course, feel free to interact and build that rapport or share some commonalities. If there's a laugh, if there's some other questions that you want to ask them, then so be it. This really helps you remind them that, hey, I am a human being. I am capable of empathy. So if they're telling you things that aren't very positive in their life, this is a great opportunity for you to come back and prove that empathy or that sense of compassion. I'm always assuring them that, you know, we're here to help with you. We're going to work with you. Thank you for answering these questions. It's going to help me help you in a little bit. So we're going to we're going to play a call here again in just a minute that I hope articulates a nice level of a collector showing some compassion and some empathy, kind of building that rapport with the student and how that works and sounds. And at the end of the day, as you see on the slide here, right, you got this quote here, smile and the world smiles with you. I think the rest of the quote says something like, cry and you cry alone. So, you know, people are going to be more attracted to that. You know, you bring positive back to them. If someone's bringing something with you to you that is not overly positive or is upsetting about their life, it's our job to kind of show and hear that, let them know that we've heard them, but kind of come back with something positive or try to keep it light and positive. And at the end of the day, right, we can decide, I'm going to go into this conversation and you and I are going to have this interaction, and I can decide up front that I'm going to make this a positive memory. Will it be a positive memory? Will that person walk away from speaking to you thinking this was a good call, good conversation, it was positive? Will they walk away speaking to you thinking that it was a negative memory? Or will it just be really nondescript, nothing much came of it, and it was just non-memorable? I choose to try to make things stick in my head and in my life as a positive memory. So consider the student there in front of you in the same capacity. Will they leave speaking to you with a positive, negative, or not have any memory at all about it? So let's hear a good call of interacting with the student, building the rapport.
For educational loans that you might have out there. Now, you don't have any federal loans for school or anything like that?
No, ma'am.
This is the only one you have.
That's the only one I have besides my car note.
You must have
The
had.
majority of my schooling out of pocket.
You are unique, young man, let me tell you, because what I see is so much more blatant. You have a very good opportunity to get this off your mom's shoulders right now out of default. And let me tell you how. Now, how does your credit look currently? Have you been making your payments otherwise?
Everything else, yes. My credit's not great from stuff I did in the past. I had I had a credit card that I ran up, and I
we all have that.
I was in a car wreck about 6 years ago, and I couldn't work for a little bit of while. I was pretty banged up, and at that point, between medical bills and just trying to live, I kind of I lost.
Great, you're on the right track. You really are. I mean, you're unique as to what I usually am dealing with as far as these files go. So I'm very optimistic for you that we can get this hammered out, because here's the thing.
So, good example there from the collector. The empathy can be heard. It seems very genuine, and me knowing that individual, I can assure you that that comes from a very genuine person. But that's part of one of the goals there, is allowing the student to kind of vent a little bit, or to kind of discuss some of the things that are putting them into the situation. Might be some negatives or some misfortunes that have happened in their life, right? Let's face it, most people don't really choose to be in debt or to be into that collection situation. But that collector was very patient. I believe she showed a lot of empathy. She told the student, you are a unique young man. The reality there is that's a professional who she knew the demographic and the age range that she was working with, and she kind of spoke to him from almost like a motherly kind of perspective, and it works for her, and it worked in that situation, and she knew it would. That account ultimately went on to get paid. The young man went and got a loan with a much lower interest rate and all that good stuff from what he was dealing with, and they got it resolved. But that is a great way to kind of allow your consumer to vent, or your student to vent just a little bit. Of course, we're not there to be their psychiatrist. We don't need them to vent for 15 or 20 minutes, but sometimes it's good for someone to just get it off their chest, lighten their load a little bit, and you're the one that is there taking it and assuring them that everything's going to be okay, and we're going to work with you through the situation. So interacting, building rapport. Anytime you have a chance to maybe laugh, if they try to crack a joke, it's okay for you to laugh. Let them hear you smile, all those kind of things. Your tone is so super important. The rate at which you speak. Do everything you can if you're in person to make eye contact with them. Keep your body language nice and soft and open. Let them see that you're giving them the attention. All right? And then that brings us to our last letter, D, as in deliver the payment options, right? The conversation can't go on forever. So at some point in time, they couldn't pay the balance in full, so we made sure we updated their information or verified it. We got certain permissions if they were needed. And perhaps if they allowed us to, we asked a couple of questions involving their current finances. While doing that, I'm also interacting and hopefully building a little bit of rapport, letting them know I'm here to work with you. My job is to help. I'm a human being. I've got family too. I can be an empathetic person. Now, since we've come this far, I'm going to hopefully have one of these situations come out. And of course, living in the real world, we got to understand that not everyone's going to want to play ball, not everyone's going to want to take all these steps with you. We'll only do our best. But on the left side there, the cooperative student, right? That is the individual who answered your questions. They maybe gave you some financial information. And you're going to be able to tell them, based on the conversation we just had, based on your current situation that you just let me know about, here's what I think is going to work for you. Let me give you 2 or 3 options. Since we can't have this balance paid in full, here's some other options that we believe will work with you and the time frames that you're talking about, right? This could include a settlement if your institution takes those, down payments. We could have flexible payments like bi-weekly stuff, or graduated payments if you're able to set those up. But letting someone know that there's options always goes a good long way. Now again, of course, this is the student who was cooperative with you. Now on the other side, also living in the real world, there's going to be individuals who simply don't want to answer those questions. They feel it's too personal, and that's completely understandable. But we would have to let them know, thank you for your time today. I'm going to give you some numbers here based on the balance I see. Maybe you did give me a time frame or so, but I'm going to use my numbers simply based off of what this institution and me as a professional believe would work best. I'm going to use these numbers because I was not able to really get any information out of you. So here's what I propose, and here are those options. Maybe if you articulate it in that way, the student will be happy to go back and maybe answer some of your questions. Maybe they don't like some of the numbers you give them. But you let them know, I have to give you some options because either you weren't able to do the first thing I needed to have happen, or what you were offering on the front end was just simply not going to be a high enough amount of money, or it would take too long to pay the balance off. So ask for payment, acquire that information, interact and build that rapport, and when the time is right, let them know, well, here's the information and here are the options that we have for you. You want to make these things make sense, right? So we'll play one last call, and ultimately I want that individual to see the light at the end of the tunnel. All right, I'm going to show you some options right now. We're almost done with this call. Thanks for sticking along with me, and here's what I have to offer. If they counter offer, no problem, then we counter offer back. So one last call to listen to, and we'll wrap this up.
don't need to wait on a letter to take a week to get to you, and then for you to probably take a week to figure out how you want to resolve the account. We need to handle this today.
Okay, but I do not have any funds whatsoever to start paying today.
Yes, sir, but you are currently working, so we can discuss a payment arrangement and choose a date that you're going to make your payment. Okay? So I'm not asking you to make a payment today, but we do need to discuss something for when you are going to make your payment and how much it's going to be.
How much was it?
Your total balance is $1,259.05.
All right, $100 starting Monday. Is that okay?
Okay, well, we can definitely, I'm not saying no to that, but we need to look into our options, okay?
All right.
So are you working full-time?
Basically.
Okay, where are you working?
I have 2 jobs.
Okay, so where are your 2 jobs at?
Domino's Pizza and Dynamic Taekwondo Academy.
Okay, what was that second one again, hon?
Dynamic Taekwondo Academy.
Okay, and what is your monthly income from both of these?
I actually do not know exactly.
So you're currently living with your parents?
No, ma'am.
Okay, but you are currently living with someone that's taking care of the... Okay, so we typically do a 3 to 6 month plan on payment arrangements for accounts that have went into default. So your 6 month, you're looking at $209.84 a month. I'm willing to work with you and stretch that 7 month, but that payment is $179.86 a month.
Let's do that.
Okay, so the student at the front end pretty quickly just threw out a random number, $100 a month. And what you did hear from the collector should have been, or what I believe she said was, I'm not saying no to that, which is a very good thing. We don't want to say no. We would want to phrase that another way. Thank you for the offer. I'm not saying no, but let me ask you a couple questions. Are you working? In fact, I have 2 jobs. Okay. And what it ultimately comes down to is she says, well, a balance of this size, I typically do 6 months. Let me throw you a bone there a little bit. I'll even break it down into a 7 month arrangement. And it got into that $100 range, and the student, without blinking an eye, agreed to it. So they went from $100 to $175 or so dollars, and there was no problem whatsoever. The student would have happily paid $100, but we ticked them up to $175. Those payments were made, and the account did get resolved. That's part of a counter offer. That's going back into acquiring that information, asking them a little bit about their finances, letting them know that, hey, we can go a little bit higher there. Make it make sense, right? So your takeaways to kind of wrap this up. Really, it's about assisting the consumer with effective conversation, showing them that you can help, realizing in the reality that we live in that there isn't really a magic single formula. It's about finding a structure that you can operate in consistently. You do this, you stick to the fundamentals, and your probabilities, your statistics will go up, and this will help you get paid. So I once again want to thank OBA for having me involved this year. It's always a pleasure to take part in your association. I hope at some point in the near future, if you're back to meeting in person, if the opportunity does exist, I'd be happy to come up and meet you all and present live. Either way, here's my email. Happy to collaborate with you, happy to answer your questions, and I hope you have something to take away from this, and I wish you a very fine day. Thank you all so much, and take care.